About 2 years ago, our wonderful host, Harriet Langford, with whom and without whom nothing of this could have ever happened, knew that I was coming down to Darien, and she asked if I could stop by Ashantilly, that there was something she had found that she wanted to show to me. That's because it had something to do with Bartram. She thought we'd be interested in it. And so since then, we've been working on bringing this, what I'm about to talk to you about, to you're the premier audience who gets to see this, and you're only getting to see some of the sketches from this sketchbook. And I'll be talking about that today. And so wherever Harriet is sitting out there, she's over there. Thank you. This is for you, Harriet. About 88 years ago, a young artist from Darien found himself studying at the Grand Central School of Art, housed where else but in New York City's Grand Central Station. It was William G. Haynes, who had lived with his parents at Ashantilly since his family moved to Darien when he was 10 years old. At age 19, Bill sailed on a Savannah Line steamship to New York, where he would study art for 9 years. In addition to the projects he undoubtedly had to complete for the art school faculty, in 1934, Bill focused on a topic of his own choosing, sketching places he knew well back home in the South. Based on his own experience, Bill imagined them through the vivid descriptions of our other Bill, William Bartram, who nearly 150 years before him had recorded his own impressions of the South in the Travels. Now, we don't know what Bill's motivations were to illustrate travels in a way that had not been seen before. Perhaps being at the epitome of hubbub, Grand Central Station, Bill was looking to turn his mind to something more contemplative. Or perhaps after being in New York for so long, he was homesick for his home ground. Bill arranged 90 watercolor and ink sketches in a large scrapbook, which we have for you to peruse over here, specimens of, to tell his version of the Bartram story. The book is also a slice of time in the life of a remarkable artist in his own right, Bill Haynes, a 26-year-old laying out his visions of subjects and landscapes he knew intimately. Once Bill returned to Ashantilly, these same landscapes would continue to offer lifelong inspiration to him, both as an artist and an environmentalist. Now, Bill didn't attempt to cover all the ground his mentor did. Instead, he focuses on Georgia, the Cherokee country of North Carolina, and the richness of northern Florida's St. Johns River and the Alachua Savannah. Now, Bill's map reflects the colonial boundaries of Bartram's time and is ornamented like the early maps of North America with images of its notable characters. Here, a helpful bear and a deer adorn the map's bar scale. Native peoples dancing alongside completely inappropriate teepees. They didn't live in teepees. Plus, the cartographically obligatory Neptune on a dolphin, and this escutcheon featuring a Bartram at its base, too absorbed in botanizing to notice the mermaids at the top. If you've read the Travels, you know that William Bartram made himself the voice describing his journey, but he never illustrated himself in the book. Only the plants, animals, landscapes, and occasionally the other people he encountered. In contrast, Bill Haynes was under no such stricture when it came to picturing William Bartram. The sketchbook opens with the older Bartram on the left, seated at his desk back in Philadelphia, writing the manuscript of Travels, safe at home in his late father's garden, while in his mind's eye, he pictures his youthful self on the right, in the field, with long hair, straw hat, and bright blue eyes. Not being bound by Bartram's personal modesty, Bill Haynes' William Bartram appears on nearly every page. Here, we see William most of the time deeply engaged at his field work with long dark hair and a full beard. At times, he looks downright haggard. Well, what are we doing there?
Point it that way.
Okay.
Do we?
Oh, I did miss one. Let's go back. Okay, or here he looks downright haggard. You have to agree with me. Fighting off the alligators when he wrote, they struck their jaws together so close to my ears as to almost stun me, and I expected every moment to be dragged out of the boat and instantly devoured. But I applied my weapons so effectually about me, though at random, that I was successful as to beat them off a little. When finding that they designed to renew the battle, I made for the shore as the only means left to me for my preservation. Thank you, Bill, checking in from heaven up there. But occasionally, perhaps in close proximity to where we are in Darien, where Bartram spent many of the winter months at the home of Lachlan McIntosh, a different Bartram appears in the sketchbook. Washed and clean shaven, blonde, broad-shouldered, and dressed in immaculate buckskin. Perhaps it is an idealized version of how Bartram saw himself, or perhaps as Bill Haynes saw himself in Bartram's shoes. Although Bartram didn't picture himself with travels, includes engravings of some of the plants he discovered during his sojourn in the South. Bill's sketchbook, too, has a number of plant illustrations, but most are too small to be accurately identified. Believe me, I've tried. After all, Bill Haynes was making sketches from memory, not illustrations for scientific purposes. And yet, among the illustrations are examples of Bill's own careful draftsmanship. The conveniently labeled Carolina jasmine, about which Bartram wrote, "What seems remarkable, the yellow jasmine, which is killed by a very slight frost in the open air in Pennsylvania, here on the summits of the Cherokee Mountains, associates with the Canadian vegetables and appears roving with them in perfect bloom and gaiety." Or here, Bill's image of ospreys at rest and in flight, about which our other Bill said, "This is a large bird of a high and rapid flight. Its wings are very long and pointed, and he spreads a vast sail in proportion to the volume of his body. This princely bird subsists entirely on fish, which he takes himself, scorning to live and grow fat on the dear-earned labors of another. He also contributes liberally to the support of the bald eagle." Or here, Bartram waxing poetic about papayas, which were present in the South in Bartram's time, but are now long gone. He wrote, "This admirable tree is certainly the most beautiful of any vegetable production I know of. The towering laurel, magnolia, and exalted palm indeed exceeded in grandeur and magnificence, but not in elegance, delicacy, and gracefulness." And for you bird lovers out there, anhingas, living up to their common name, snake bird. Bartram describes them this way: "They delight to sit in little peaceable communities on the dry limbs of trees, hanging over the still waters, with their wings and tails expanded, I suppose, to cool and air themselves, when at the same time they behold their images in the watery mirror. At such times when we approach them, they drop off the limbs into the water as if dead, and for a minute or two are not to be seen, when on a sudden, at a vast distance, their long, slender head and neck only appear, and have very much the appearance of a snake, and no other part of them are to be seen when swimming in the water, except some, the tip end of their tails." Both of our Bills, through their words and their art, show a wry sense of humor. Here's one example from the sketchbook. It's based on Bartram's description of a turkey hunt gone awry. The unseen turkey overhead on your left, startled by the discharge of the oblivious Bartram's gun. And then on the right, William's attempt to outstalk a bobcat, also intent on hunting the same group of turkeys beyond the log. Both human and feline would be thwarted in their quest by the loud gunshot of another hunting companion who also missed the deer he was aiming at. Bartram wrote, "This cunning fellow hunter was a large, fat wildcat. He saw me and at times seems to watch my motions, as if determined to seize the delicious prey before me, upon which I changed my object and leveled my piece at him. At that instant, my companion at a distance also discharged his piece at the deer, the report of which alarmed the flock of turkeys, and my fellow hunter, the cat, sprang over the log and trotted off." As with Bartram's words, Bill's sketches highlight the abundance of nature described in the travels. Here we see Bartram easily collecting vining plants from his canoe on the Altamaha. The grapevines with the buckthorn, trumpet vine, crossvine, and other rambling shrubby vines seem to tie the trees together with garlands and festoons and form enchanting shades. Or riding horseback beneath a gargantuan magnolia at the edge of the Alachua Savannah on his way to rendezvous with 3 Seminole companions standing at the base of the tree. Bartram described it this way: "The morning cool and pleasant and the skies serene. We decamped, pursuing our progress round the Alachua Savannah." Or here, Bartram's zeal for plant collecting so astounded the elder Seminole named Cowkeeper that he bestowed a new name on William. The chief trader informed the Cowkeeper, in the presence of his council or attendants, the purport of our business, with which he expressed his satisfaction. He was then informed of what the nature of my errand was, and he received me with complaisance, giving me unlimited permission to travel over the country for the purpose of collecting flowers, medicinal plants, etc., and saluting me by the name of Puck Puggy, or the flower hunter, recommending me to the friendship and protection of his people. Bartram was also a keen observer of how people, both the natives and the Europeans, brought human order into the landscape. The tidy waterfront on the Darien Bluff, or as he called it, the heights of Darien. The precise layout of the Cherokee grounds at Cowee in North Carolina. The avenue leading down to the St. John's at Mount Royal, about which he wrote, "From this place we enjoyed a most enchanting prospect of the great Lake George through a grand avenue." And here is Bill Haynes' stunning Art Deco portrayal of St. Augustine, the Castillo de San Marco and the town gates here at the bottom. The Seminole in his canoe seizing the left side of the sketch, and an icon for the people of the pre-Columbian South, a great spotted cat slinking up the peninsula of Florida. He wrote about this place: "Tobacco and pipes are brought. The skin of a wild cat or young tiger stuffed with tobacco is brought and laid at the king's feet, with the great or royal pipe beautifully adorned. The skin is usually of the animals of the king's family or tribe, as the wild cat." In contrast to these imprints of human action, many times in travels, William Bartram reflects on his aloneness, as here, where Bill sketches William having made his bed for the night under a fallen oak. "It began to thunder. I was sufficiently warned to prepare against a wet night, and observing a very large oak tree, which had been thrown down by a hurricane and offered me a convenient shelter, as its enormous limbs bore up its trunk, a sufficient height from the earth to admit me to sit or lie down under it, I spread my sail, slanting from the trunk of the tree to the ground on the windward side, and having collected a quantity of wood sufficient to keep up a fire during the night, I struck up one in front, and spreading skins on the ground, and upon these placing a blanket, one half I laid down upon, turning the other over me for a covering." And years later, we have this self-portrait of Bill, sketched as he, like Bartram, made his bed on the ground during his army service in New Guinea in World War II. Now, our wonderful historian, Catherine Brond, often calls Bartram America's first anthropologist. In addition to his rich descriptions of the life and culture of the native peoples, he also tells us more broadly about life on the frontier. I like to think of William Bartram striking out across the South like a colonial version of Tennessee Williams Blanche Dubois. William, depending on the kindness of strangers, just as she did. Bill Haynes pictures some of those people whom Bartram met. The hospitable man on the bearskin at the south end of St. Simon's Island, where Bartram writes, "Yet I pray you stay a little, I will soon have some refreshment for you." Presently was laid before us a plentiful repast of venison, etc., our drink being honey and water strengthened by the addition of brandy. Our rural table was spread under the shadow of oaks, palms, and sweet bays, fanned by the lively salubrious breezes wafted from the spicy groves. Our music was the responsive lovelace of the painted nonpareil and the alert and gay mockbird, whilst the brilliant hummingbird darted through the flowery groves, suspended in air, and drank nectar from the flowers. And as we know, Lachlan McIntosh, who not only hosted Bartram at his home just across the river from us on General's Island, but also sent his son John out to accompany Bartram for 1,000 miles of his journey. Perhaps to a grateful mind, there is no intellectual enjoyment which regards human concerns of a more excellent nature than the remembrance of real acts of friendship. When I came up to his door, the friendly man, smiling and with a grace and dignity peculiar to himself, took me by the hand and accosted me thus: "Friend Bartram, come under my roof, and I desire you to make my house your home, as long as convenient to yourself. Remember from this moment that you are a part of my family, and on my part, I shall endeavor to make it agreeable." Or here, Mr. Marshall on the St. Johns River, who welcomed him twice into his home. The gentleman received me in the most polite manner, and after hearing my situation, he requested me to make my abode with him a few days to rest and refresh myself. I thanked him and told him I would stay a day. Having carpenters at work on a new building, he sat them about repairing my vessel, which by night was completely refitted. And of course, the genuine welcome shown to Bartram as he rested at Watoga in the realm of the Cherokees. During my continuance here, about half an hour, I experienced the most perfect and agreeable hospitality conferred on me by these happy people. I mean, happy in their dispositions, in their apprehensions of rectitude with regard to our social or moral conduct. Oh, divine simplicity and truth, friendship without fallacy or guile, hospitality disinterested, native, undefiled, unmodified by artificial refinements. But just so you know, it was not just hospitable men. There are women in travels. Here we have his famous encounter with scantily clad Cherokee maidens picking strawberries. Companies of young, innocent Cherokee virgins, some busily gathering the rich, fragrant fruit, others having already filled their baskets, lay reclined under the shade of floriferous and fragrant native bowers, disclosing their beauties to the fluttering breeze, and bathing their limbs in the cool, fleeting streams, whilst other parties, more gay and libertine, were yet collecting strawberries or wantonly chasing their companions, tantalizing them, staining their lips and cheeks with the rich fruit. This sylvan scene of primitive innocence was enchanting and perhaps too enticing for hardy young men long to continue idle spectators. And more soberly, his observations on how the native women prepared the food that they freely shared with him. The Creeks store up the shellbark hickory in their towns. I have seen above 100 bushels of these nuts belonging to one family. They pound them to pieces and then cast them into boiling water, which, after passing through fine strainers, preserves the most oily part of the liquid. This they call by a name which signifies hickory milk. It is as sweet and rich as fresh cream, and is an ingredient in most of their cookery, especially hominy and corn cakes. And yet Bartram sensed that the tribes he met all along the way were being inexorably swept from their lands by encroaching white settlement. Early in travels, William describes the sit-down strike that ensued when the Creeks and Cherokees contested the accuracy of the survey instruments used by the British to mark the boundary of the new purchase in 1773, when 2.1 million acres changed hands. Bill illustrates Bartram's description. Note the compass at the top. Indeed, the survey instruments were faulty. The natives had known the rise and fall of this land for generations, far better than any British tenderfoot. He writes, the Indian chief came up and observing the course fixed upon spoke and said it was not right, but that the course to the place was so-and-so, holding up his right hand and pointing. The surveyor replied that he himself was certainly right, adding that the little instrument pointing to the compass told him so, which he said could not err. The Indian answered he knew better, and that the little wicked instrument was a liar, and he would not acquiesce in its decision since it would wrong the Indians out of their land. This mistake, the surveyor proving to be in the wrong, displeased the Indians. The dispute arose to that height that the chief and his party determined to break up the business and return the shortest way home, and forbade the surveyors to proceed any farther. However, after some delay, the complacent and prudent conduct of the colonel made them change their resolution. The chief became reconciled upon condition that the compass should be discarded and rendered incapable of serving on this business, that the chief himself should lead the survey, and moreover, receive an order for a very considerable quantity of goods. And throughout the sketchbook, Bill portrays the bearing and dignity of the native men, in contrast to many of Bartram's white contemporaries who saw them only as savages. This company consisted of 7 young Seminoles under the conduct of a young prince or chief. They were all dressed and painted with singular elegance and richly ornamented with silver plates, chains, etc., after the Seminole mode, with waving plumes of feathers on their crests. Bartram could see this change coming and lament its passage. Here we see Bill's sketch. Bartram shaking hands in greeting and friendship with a Seminole at the edge of the great Alachua Savannah, the Carolina parakeet on the left overhead, perhaps symbolizing the coming losses that would affect both man and beast. On our return to camp in the evening, we were saluted by a party of young Indian warriors who had pitched their camp on a green eminence near the lake. And at a small distance from our camp, under a little grove of oaks and palms. On our coming up to them, they arose and shook hands. We alighted and sat a while with them by their cheerful fire. And yet there are still places where we can see what Bartram saw, things like Philip was showing you today, what Bill Haynes knew in his own time. And we can hear Bartram's words across the centuries to guide us toward a more just, peaceful world. And no place better symbolizes this than William's contemplation of Blue Spring. And although this paradise of fish may seem to exhibit a just representation of the peaceable and happy state of nature which existed before the fall, yet in reality, it is a mere representation, for the nature of the fish is the same as if they were in Lake George or the river. But here, the water or element in which they live and move is so perfectly clear and transparent, it places them all on an equality with regard to their ability to injure or to escape from one. Here is no covert, no ambush. Here the trout freely passes by the very nose of the alligator and laughs in his face, and the brim by the trout. But what is really surprising, that the consciousness of each other's safety or some other latent cause should so absolutely alter their conduct. For here is not the least attempt made to injure or disturb one another. Let us be obedient to the ruling powers in such things as regards human affairs, our duties to each other, and all creatures and concerns that are submitted to our care and control. So in closing, you may know that Benjamin Franklin once suggested to John Bartram that his seemingly aimless son become a printer. Instead, William Bartram went on to explore the South, write travels, and become a mentor to the next generation of scientists exploring America's natural bounty. Across the years, one of his acolytes, Bill Haynes, would take Franklin up on the suggestion that William Bartram declined. After the end of the war, Bill enrolled in an evening course in typography from the Graphic Arts Institute, which led to a job working with Bruce Rogers Thistle Press in the publication of the Frick Art Catalog. In other words, he was trained by the best in the art and craft of letterpress printing. And he took this new passion and his bride, Natalie Erdman, back here to Darien in 1955 to start the Ashantilly Press. It became not only a place to create beautiful art in the form of books and broadsides, but also to teach this craft and to inspire the next generation of creative artists. What a way to honor his inspiration, the other Bill, William Bartram. Thank you.